As promised, these are tips on getting the pizza pie to the oven. Make sure your peel is dry. Make sure your peel is room temp, not cold and not hot. And this pizza already has flour under it. I'm just gonna sprinkle a tiny bit of flour on there. And we might not even use all that, because here comes the magic tip. You first want to test it to see if it does in fact slide around and slide off. So just put it underneath and you see how that's sliding, and I can slide it off. There is a little bit of give. You see how it's pulled the pizza this way? So put it back on. You see how it's sliding a bit better now, and I can slide it off. Keep testing it to see if it will in fact slide off, and then you can get rid of that. See? Put it in the oven like that. Don't even go to the oven if it's not doing that, if it's not coming off and it's not sliding, because you can rearrange this, you can reshape it, but once it's in there, if it looks like the shape of the Republic of Ireland, you're gonna have a Republic of Ireland shaped pizza, I'm afraid. What if I told you the best pizza that you can make is actually the easiest? This is Sauron Bublé. He's my resident starter. Because he makes my pizzas taste fire, I suppose you could call him a fire starter. Wicked fire starter. Welcome to part 2 of my master dough video. If you haven't watched that one, you can see it right here. If you're just here for the dough, skip to that chapter by all means, baby boo. Get the fuck out of here. Roll on with the enzymatic reactions. Sauron is a great example of long fermentation. He's been in and out of the fridge for a couple of months now, and all I do is get him out, make a pizza with him, and then feed him 150 grams of flour and 150 grams of water, and then I put him back in the fridge until next time, which is usually about a week after. That's it. After you maturate a starter, that is. And starting out with simply keeping alive a poolish long enough to become what's called a SCOBY, or symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, is a foolproof way to do it. And I'll teach you how later in the video. But this practice helps illustrate the question I posed at the end of the last video. What happens if you let dough ferment for too long? If long fermentation is so good, why don't we just leave dough balls in the fridge for a week and never freeze them? While too quick a fermentation can result in insipid tasting crust with less colour, too long a fermentation can result in insipid tasting crust with less colour. And why can't Sauron chill out in the fridge for months? The answer is food. I feed my boy. You see, yeasts don't eat the sugars in flour. They break the starches down using enzymes into sugars, 4 different kinds to be exact. But guess what? Enzymatic activity, like bacterial activity, takes time. Too fast to ferment means the temperatures in yeast amount are high. The yeast multiply like crazy, farting their brains out, but the enzymes can't process the starches as quickly as the yeasts fornicate. So therefore, the starches in the flour stay starches, by and large. And forget about bacterial actions and the flavour that they impart, they have no chance in this environment. It's those sugars that help to accentuate the flavour of the grain, and they are what gives the crust its colour through Maillard reaction, which also imparts its own unique flavours. The other extreme is letting these reactions go on for far too long. In this case, our little guys have eaten all the food and died. Very little sugars are left to colour the crust, but there's an abundance of acids, creating an imbalance. You wouldn't order a dish called sour and more sour chicken at a Chinese restaurant, would you? Again, it's a balancing act. It always brings us back to the triangle. This time we have enzymes in the middle with bacteria. Further, enzymatic activity improves the structure of the dough by breaking certain proteins down and providing more extensibility. In short, a very fast dough, tough, a very long dough, weak. Although this refers to extremes, and kneading has more of an impact in that case. Whenever you get a dough ball out of any container, just lightly pull it out. You want to just pull it out. In this particular example, I'm going to show you a technique that we used to use at a pizza place where I work. I'm going to try and exert the least amount of pressure as I can on the very outer rim. This is called dimpling right here. You see this? This is like degassing it. I'm pushing through the bubbles. They're creating more bubbles. And you see that slapping technique? It kind of pushes the bubbles outwards. You'll see when the final pizza comes out the oven. So this one's nice and extensible. Give it slap, 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 slap. Slap it like something that you slap. You're gonna see the magic that happens. Wherever you push all the way down on is gonna be the beginning, or the end if you will, of the crust. One thing about the sauce, you stick your finger in it, and if you can't feel anything, it's good. If it feels warm, it's probably too warm, and if it feels cold, it's probably too cold. Wow, she's nice and round. A little bit of fresh basil, and then this is a secret sauce that I'm gonna make a video about one fine day, but just suffice it to say that this stuff is fucking cool. Boom. Most people think that making and keeping a starter is difficult, and for good reasons. If you don't feed it on time and keep it in a properly controlled environment, it can be difficult to get them to reach maturity. Bit like me. And that is why I cheated. I just kept feeding a poolish that I made that I never got around to using. I started with 180 grams of poolish, which was the amount I used for my old recipe, and then I fed it another 90 grams each of flour and water for like 2 days, and it started getting bigger than my mason jar. So I started discarding. I would discard all but 125 grams of it, and then add 125 grams each of flour and water every 24 hours for a week, leaving it out at room temp. After that week I did the same thing but only weekly, and it stayed in the fridge. I use 300 grams of this now for a pizza dough. I will then feed it 150 to 160 grams of flour and water each, leave it out for an hour or two, and then pop it back in the fridge. And if I was to just leave this out at room right now, it would be all over the show. I will provide full instructions in the description as always, but I won't be providing instructions on how to start a starter from scratch using wild yeasts. There's millions of blogs and videos out there if you want to search it, or you could go on Amazon and buy one of these. Link in the description. It's a San Francisco sourdough style culture. This actually has special bacteria in it called something like San Francisco's Maximas or something. I don't know the name of them, but they're special wild yeast and they're only found in San Francisco. It comes with detailed instructions on how to get it going. These are the little guys, the little cultures, and I'm actually going to just start this one now and have a new San Fransisco. So this is how to start this San Fransisco. The first thing I want to say right off the beginning is that this is all in imperial measurements, which and I'm going to show you why imperial measurements, or at least weighing by volume, is a load of bollocks and you shouldn't do it. Because this tells you to put a tablespoon each of flour and water in to start this thing off. So if you just used a tablespoon, you'd be putting somewhere in the region of 12 grams of water in there and only about 8 grams of flour in it, which is more water to food. And you already know what happens there. It's going to, you know, it's not equal. So I measured these out, and you can do the same. I started with 20 grams of flour and 20 grams of water. And basically the instructions just tell you every 12 to 24 hours, they want you to double this amount. So I'll be using 40 grams, 40 grams. And then after 12 to 24 hours, I'll be using 80 and 80, so on. But the way this thing gets started, I don't know if you can see it there. Can you see that? Little flour bits. Well, it's sour as a motherfucker. So the first one is these tiny amounts. Put these in. I don't need this anymore. Every 12 to 24 hours, I'm just going to feed it double each of what I got to there until this looks like it's not going to take that amount anymore, and then I'll discard it down to say 100 grams and feed it 100 grams each. Whatever I decide on, it doesn't matter. Like I said, this stuff's all going to multiply, so I can keep it at whatever level I want. And the reason why I choose to use an exact ratio is because if we keep this soup and we've got loads of water in it, it's going to be really hard to keep an eye on, because the 12 to 24 hours isn't a rigid, boom, set your alarm to it. Because if this thing's blowing its top after 6 or 7 hours, it's time to feed it, else it's going to die. Lots of increased activity is a sign that it needs food. This water in here is Brita filter water. Don't use some awful tap water, and I just use some organic flour from Whole Foods. Breathable lid or a coffee filter. Boom. Looks like a little hat. San Fransisco. You saw him being born. There are a couple of things that you need to be aware of when you are going from hand kneading to mixing. First of all, I recommend that you do that exactly. Go from hand kneading to using a mixer. Make a lot of dough with your hands first, so you know what the dough should feel like when it comes out of this. One of the biggest advantages of having a mixer is convenience, obviously. What makes this, you know, more advanced dough the most convenient is not really the mixer. It is the fact that I've got my SCOBY, old sauron buble, sitting in the fridge whenever I need him. So whenever I get the urge, or if I just want to make a dough on a whim, I've got a pre-ferment just here. I'm gonna make a dough. I go and grab Mr. Scooby-Doo. You add the wet ingredients first, add our water, and this should read 560. And then I'm gonna chuck 300 grams of my boy up in to sauron. There are some distinct advantages as far as your, you know, time, ability to do other things while it's mixing. I don't have to add any water or any flour. I can be much more precise with it. I just mix it, and I don't have to keep adding stuff to my fingers or the bowl to make it more manageable. All we have in there is the wet ingredients. Over here are all the dry ingredients, the sugar, the gluten, then the malt. Instant dry yeast will all go into this bowl. So we'll mix this up, and we'll get old Scooby-Doo mixing around on setting 1, the lowest speed, just to mix him up a bit. As you can see, here is the oil and the salt, just like we've done for every other formula. This is all the exact same ratio of ingredients as every other formula, except 150 grams of the flour and 150 grams of the water are being made up by Mr. Buble. So we're gonna leave it on number 1 speed and add our dries to the mixer. Everything's mixed up, and it's already 72 degrees. So I'm going to add the flour and the salt now. Usually while this is mixing, that's when I feed sauron buble again, 150 each, flour and water. I leave that out for another hour or so to get some of that activity going, and then I put him straight back in the fridge, and then the whole process starts again maybe a week later. So I'm going to give you a good example of a window pane that I would fail this. This is only about 75 degrees dough right now, and it's only been in for 6 or 7 minutes, but you see how it's ripping there? For some that's good, I don't mind it, but it's ripping right as we're getting the window pane, so it needs a little bit longer. A few things to keep in mind when you're using a mixer. Wet ingredients in first. Keep an eye on the temperature. The temperature will increase as the dough mixes. This is 78 degrees. This is exactly where I want it. So I'm going to cover this and sit this baby at room temperature for 20. Computer, start a timer for 20 minutes.
20 minutes, starting now. While you wait, do you want to listen to the station Deutsche Grammophon on Amazon Music?
I do not. So this is just going to rest, covered at room temperature for 20 minutes. It's going to get boiled up and treated exactly the same as the mom. It's exactly like the poolish recipe, only way more convenient. It's important to point out that what I have said over these last 2 videos applies proportionately to the different doughs outlined. So in other words, the complex flavors from the good bacteria, the golden color from the natural sugars, from the flour, and the crispy outside, fluffy inside, all that stuff improves as you use a more advanced technique. And most ironically, the time to achieve these from a day-to-day perspective decreases. In other words, the dough that I'm showing you today takes less time and yields better results than the first dough I showed you in the last video, the bulk fermentation one. With that one, to maximize the flavor and the color and the crust and all that stuff, you want nice, slow, cold fermentation. This, I can have way better results in 24 hours. I still have a long way to go before I can claim I can make perfect pizza, if there is such a thing. It might seem like I'm trying to convince you that I've learned everything about fermentation, mixing and baking, our favorite food, but I am just starting the journey like you. I'm actually hoping that after these last couple of videos you're in the same spot as me. We have the tools and the knowledge to refine our craft, but need a lot of time and patience to knock killer pies out consistently. The best way, if not the only way I truly believe that this can be achieved, is by keeping a dough journal. Keep a record of every dough you make. Get yourself a tank gum, a pad and a pen, and each time you whip up a batch, write down any tweaks you make to your formula, the exact duration of the pre-ferment, how long you mix the dough, what speed if you're using a mixer, rest times, basically anything that affects the triangle. Times, temps and durations, all the way up to how long it sits on the cooling rack. Then you can answer your own questions. I wonder why the dough hasn't got good strength. A quick look at your journal might tell you might have added the salt a bit late. Or why does my pie not have a perfect colour? Did I let it ferment a bit too long at this stage or that stage of the mix? Perhaps it was out at room temperature for a bit too long, so on and so forth. It might sound a little bit tedious. In fact, it does sound tedious. It's well worth it, and it takes you a few minutes while you're making the dough to just There's been more than one occasion where I've made a god batch and wish I knew exactly what gave it that X factor. Thanks for watching this. See you next time. See you next time.